Calgary said apologetically, "It's very good of you to see me again, Mr. Marshall." "Not at all," said the lawyer. "As you know, I went down to Sunny Point and saw Jack Argyle's family." "Quite so." "You will have heard by now, I expect, about my visit." "Yes, Dr. Calgary, that is correct. What you may find it difficult to understand is why I have come back here to you again. You see, things didn't turn out exactly as I thought they would." "No," said the lawyer. "No, perhaps not." His voice was as usual, dry and unemotional. Yet something in it encouraged Arthur Calgary to continue. "I thought, you see," went on Calgary, "that it would be the end of it all. I was prepared for a certain amount of, what shall I say, natural resentment on their part. Although concussion may be termed, I suppose, an act of God, yet from their point of view, they could be forgiven for that, as I say, but at the same time I hoped it would be offset by the thankfulness they would feel over the fact that Jack Argyle's name was cleared. But things didn't turn out as I anticipated. Not at all." "I see. Perhaps, Mr. Marshall, you anticipated something of what would happen. Your manner, I remember, puzzled me when I was here before. Did you foresee the attitude of mind that I was going to encounter?" "You haven't told me yet, Dr. Calgary, what that attitude was." Arthur Calgary drew his chair forward. "I thought that I was ending something, giving, shall we say, a different end to a chapter already written, but I was made to feel, I was made to see that instead of ending something, I was starting something altogether new. Is that a true statement, do you think, of the position?" Mr. Marshall nodded his head slowly. "Yes," he said, "it could be put that way. I did think, I admit it, that you were not realizing all the implications. You could not be expected to do so, because, naturally, you knew nothing of the background, or of the facts except as they were given in the law reports." No, I see that now. Only too clearly." His voice rose as he went on excitedly. "It wasn't really relief they felt. It wasn't thankfulness. It was apprehension. A dread of what might be coming next, am I right?" Marshall said cautiously. "I should think probably that you are quite right. Mind you, I do not speak of my own knowledge." "And if so," went on Calgary, "then I no longer feel that I can go back to my work satisfied with having made the only amends that I can make. I'm still involved. I'm responsible for bringing a new factor into various people's lives. I can't just wash my hands of it." The lawyer cleared his throat. "That, perhaps, is a rather fanciful point of view, Dr. Calgary." "I don't think it is. Not really. One must take responsibility for one's actions, and not only one's actions, but for the result of one's actions. Just on 2 years ago, I gave a lift to a young hitchhiker on the road. When I did that, I set in train a certain course of events. I don't feel that I can disassociate myself from them." The lawyer still shook his head. "Very well, then," said Arthur Calgary impatiently. "Call it fanciful if you like, but my feelings, my conscience are still involved. My only wish was to make amends for something it had been outside my power to prevent. I've not made amends. In some curious way, I've made things worse for people who have already suffered. But I still don't understand clearly why." "No," said Marshall slowly. "No, you would not see why. For the past 18 months or so, you've been out of touch with civilization. You did not read the daily papers, the account of this family that was given in the newspapers. Possibly you would not have read them anyway, but you could not have escaped, I think, hearing about them. The facts are very simple, Dr. Calgary. They're not confidential. They were made public at the time. It resolves itself very simply into this. If Jack Argyle did not, and by your account he cannot have, committed the crime, then who did? That brings us back to the circumstances in which the crime was committed. It was committed between the hours of 7 and 7:30 on a November evening in a house where the deceased woman was surrounded by the members of her own family and household. The house was securely locked and shuttered, and if anyone entered from outside, then the outsider must have been admitted by Mrs. Argyle herself, or have entered with their own key. In other words, it must have been someone she knew. It resembles in some ways the conditions of the Borden case in America, where Mr. Borden and his wife were struck down by blows of an axe on a Sunday morning. Nobody in the house heard anything. Nobody was known or seen to approach the house. You can see, Dr. Calgary, why the members of the family were, as you put it, disturbed rather than relieved by the news you brought them. Calgary said slowly, "They'd rather— You mean that Jack Argyle was guilty?" "Oh, yes," said Marshall. "Oh, yes, very decidedly so. If I may put it in a somewhat cynical way, Jack Argyle was the perfect answer to the unpleasant fact of murder in the family. He had been a problem child, a delinquent boy, a man of violent temper. Excuses could be and were made for him within the family circle. They could mourn for him, have sympathy with him, declare to themselves, to each other, and to the world that it was not really his fault, that psychologists could explain it all. Yes, very, very convenient. And now—" Calgary stopped. "And now," said Mr. Marshall, "it is different. Of course, quite different. Almost alarming, perhaps." Calgary said shrewdly, "The news I brought was unwelcome to you, too, wasn't it?" "I must admit that. Yes, I must admit that I was upset. A case which was closed satisfactorily— Yes, I shall continue to use the word satisfactorily— is now reopened." "Is that official?" Calgary asked. "I mean, from the police point of view. Will the case be reopened?" "Oh, undoubtedly," said Marshall. "When Jack Argyle was found guilty on overwhelming evidence, the jury was only out a quarter of an hour. That was an end of the matter as far as the police were concerned, but now, with the grant of a free pardon posthumously awarded, the case is opened again." "And the police will make fresh investigations?" "Almost certainly, I should say." "Of course," added Marshall, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "It is doubtful, after this lapse of time, owing to the peculiar features of the case, whether they will be able to achieve any result. For myself, I should doubt it. They may know that someone in the house is guilty. They may get so far as to have a shrewd idea of who that someone is. But to get definite evidence will not be easy." "I see," said Calgary. "I see. Yes, that's what she meant." The lawyer said sharply, "Of whom are you speaking?" "The girl," said Calgary. "Hester Argyle." "Ah, yes. Young Hester," he asked curiously. "What did she say to you?" "She spoke of the innocent," said Calgary. "She said it wasn't the guilty who mattered, but the innocent. I understand now what she meant." Marshall cast a sharp glance at him. "I think possibly you do." "She meant just what you were saying," said Arthur Calgary. "She meant that once more the family would be under suspicion." Marshall interrupted. "Hardly once more," he said. "There was never time for the family to come under suspicion before. Jack Argyle was clearly indicated from the first." Calgary waved the interruption aside. "The family would come under suspicion," he said, "and it might remain under suspicion for a long time, perhaps forever. If one of the family was guilty, it is possible that they themselves would not know which one. They would look at each other and wonder. Yes, that's what would be the worst of all. They themselves would not know which. There was a silence. Marshall watched Calgary with a quiet, appraising glance, but he said nothing. "That's terrible, you know," said Calgary, his thin, sensitive face showing the play of emotion on it. "Yes, that's terrible. To go on year after year not knowing, looking at one another, perhaps the suspicion affecting one's relationships with people, destroying love, destroying trust." Marshall cleared his throat. "Aren't you, putting it rather too vividly?" "No," said Calgary, "I don't think I am. I think perhaps, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Marshall, I see this more clearly than you do. I can imagine, you see, what it might mean." Again there was silence. "It means," said Calgary, "that it is the innocent who are going to suffer, and the innocent should not suffer, only the guilty. That's why I can't wash my hands of it. I can't go away and say, I've done the right thing, I've made what amends I can, I've served the cause of justice. Because, you see, what I have done has not served the cause of justice. It has not brought conviction to the guilty. It has not delivered the innocent from the shadow of guilt. I think you are working yourself up a little, Dr. Calgary. What you say has some foundation of truth, no doubt, but I don't see exactly what you can do about it." "No, nor do I," said Calgary frankly. "But it means that I've got to try. That's really why I've come to you, Mr. Marshall. I think I have a right to know the background." "Oh, well," said Mr. Marshall, his tone slightly brisker, "there's no secret about all that. I can give you any facts you want to know. More than facts, I'm not in a position to give you. I've never been on intimate terms with the household. Our firm has acted for Mrs. Argyle over a number of years. We have cooperated with her over establishing various trusts and seeing to legal business. Mrs. Argyle herself I knew reasonably well, and I also knew her husband. Of the atmosphere at Sunny Point, of all the temperaments and characters of the various people living there, I only know, as you might say, at second hand, through Mrs. Argyle herself." "I quite understand all that," said Calgary, "but I've got to make a start somewhere. I understand that the children were not her own, that they were adopted. And that is so. Mrs. Argyle was born Rachel Constam, the only daughter of Rudolph Constam, a very rich man. Her mother was American, and also a very rich woman in her own right. Rudolph Constam had many philanthropic interests, and brought his daughter up to take an interest in those benevolent schemes. He and his wife died in an aeroplane crash, and Rachel then devoted the large fortune she inherited from her father and mother to what we may term, loosely, philanthropical enterprises. She took a personal interest in these benefactions and did a certain amount of settlement work herself. It was in doing the latter that she met Leo Argyle, who was an Oxford don with a great interest in economics and social reform. To understand Mrs. Argyle, you have to realize that the great tragedy of her life was that she was unable to have children. As is the case with many women, this disability gradually overshadowed the whole of her life. When, after visits to all kinds of specialists, it seemed clear that she could never hope to be a mother, she had to find what alleviation she could. She adopted first a child from a slum tenement in New York. That is the present Mrs. Durrant. Mrs. Argyle devoted herself almost entirely to charities connected with children. On the outbreak of war in 1939, she established, under the auspices of the Ministry of Health, a kind of war nursery for children, purchasing the house you visited, Sunny Point. Then called Viper's Point, said Calgary. Yes, I believe that was the original name. Ah, yes, Perhaps in the end a more suitable name than the name she chose for it, Sunny Point. In 1940, she had about 12 to 16 children, mostly those who had unsatisfactory guardians, or who could not be evacuated with their own families. Everything was done for these children. They were given a luxurious home. I remonstrated with her, pointing out to her that it was going to be difficult for the children after several years of war to return from these luxurious surroundings to their homes. She paid no attention to me. She was deeply attached to the children, and finally she formed the project of adding some of them, those from particularly unsatisfactory homes or who were orphans, to her own family. This resulted in a family of 5. Mary, now married to Philip Durrant, Michael, who works in Drymouth, Tina, a child of mixed race, Hester, and of course Jacko. They grew up regarding the Argyles as their father and mother. They were given the best education money could buy. If environment counts for anything, they should have gone far. They certainly had every advantage. Jack, or Jacko as they called him, was always unsatisfactory. He stole money at school and had to be taken away. He got into trouble in his first year at the university. Twice he only avoided a jail sentence by a very narrow margin. He always had an ungovernable temper. All this, however, you probably have already gathered. Twice embezzlement on his part was made good by the Argyles, twice money was spent in setting him up in business. Twice these business enterprises failed. After his death an allowance was paid, and indeed is still paid, to his widow. Calgary leant forward in astonishment. His widow? Nobody has ever told me that he was married. Dear, dear! The lawyer clicked his thumb irritably. I have been remiss. I had forgotten, of course, that you had not read the newspaper reports. I may say that none of the Argyle family had any idea that he was married. Immediately after his arrest, his wife appeared at Sunny Point in great distress. Mr. Argyle was very good to her. She was a young woman who had worked as a dance hostess in the Drymouth Palais de Danse. I probably forgot to tell you about her because she remarried a few weeks after Jack's death. Her present husband is an electrician, I believe, in Drymouth. I must go and see her, said Calgary. He added reproachfully, She is the first person I should have gone to see. Certainly, certainly. I will give you the address. I really cannot think why I did not mention it to you when you first came to me. Calgary was silent. She was such a negligible factor, said the lawyer apologetically. Even the newspapers did not play her up much. She never visited her husband in prison or took any further interest in him. Calgary had been deep in thought. He said now, Can you tell me exactly who was in that house on the night Mrs. Argyle was killed? Marshall gave him a sharp glance. Leo Argyle, of course, and the youngest daughter, Hester. Mary Durrant and her invalid husband were there on a visit. He had just come out of hospital. And then there was Kirsten Lindstrom, whom you probably met. She is a Swedish-trained nurse and masseuse who originally came to help Mrs. Argyle with her war nursery, and has remained on ever since. Michael and Tina were not there. Michael works as a car salesman in Drymouth, and Tina has a job in the county library at Redmin, and lives in a flat there. Marshall paused before going on. There was also Miss Vaughan, Mr. Argyle's secretary. She had left the house before the body was discovered. I met her also, said Calgary. She seems very attached to Mr. Argyle. Yes, I believe there may shortly be an engagement announced. Ah. He has been very lonely since his wife died, said the lawyer with a faint note of reproof in his voice. Quite so, said Calgary. Then he said, What about motive, Mr. Marshall? My dear Dr. Calgary, I really cannot speculate as to that. I think you can. As you've said yourself, the facts are ascertainable. There was no direct monetary benefit to anyone. Mrs. Argyle had entered into a series of discretionary trusts, a formula which, as you know, is much adopted nowadays. These trusts were in favour of all the children. They are administered by 3 trustees, of whom I am one, Leo Argyle is one, and the third is an American lawyer, a distant cousin of Mrs. Argyle's. The very large sum of money involved is administered by these 3 trustees and can be adjusted so as to benefit those beneficiaries of the trust who need it most. What about Mr. Argyle? Did he profit in a monetary sense by his wife's death? Not to any great extent. Most of her fortune, as I have told you, had gone into trusts. She left him the residue of her estate, but that did not amount to a large sum. And Miss Lindstrom? Mrs. Argyle had bought a very handsome annuity for Miss Lindstrom some years previously. Marshall added irritably, Motive? There doesn't seem to be a ha'porth of motive about it. Certainly no financial motive. And, in the emotional field, was there any special friction? There I'm afraid I can't help you. Marshall spoke with finality. I wasn't an observer of the family life. Is there anyone who could? Marshall considered for a moment or two. Then he said, almost reluctantly, You might go and see the local doctor. Dr. McMaster, I think his name is. He's retired now, but still lives in the neighbourhood. He was medical attendant to the war nursery. He must have known and seen a good deal of the life at Sunny Point. Whether you can persuade him to tell you anything is up to you, but I think that if he chose, he might be helpful. Though, pardon me for saying this, do you think it likely that you can accomplish anything that the police cannot accomplish much more easily? I don't know, said Calgary. Probably not. But I do know this. I've got to try. Yes, I've got to try. Chapter 5. The Chief Constable's eyebrows climbed slowly up his forehead in a vain attempt to reach the receding line of his grey hair. He cast his eyes up to the ceiling and then down again to the papers on his desk. It beggars description, he said. The young man whose business it was to make the right responses to the Chief Constable said, Yes, sir. A pretty kettle of fish, muttered Major Finney. He tapped with his fingers on the table. Is Huish here? He asked. Yes, sir. Superintendent Huish came about 5 minutes ago. Right, said the Chief Constable. Send him in, will you? Superintendent Huish was a tall, sad-looking man. His air of melancholy was so profound that no one would have believed that he could be the life and soul of a children's party, cracking jokes and bringing pennies out of little boys' ears, much to their delight. The Chief Constable said, Morning, Huish. This is a pretty kettle of fish we've got here. What do you think of it? Superintendent Huish breathed heavily and sat down in the chair indicated. It seems to me as though we made a mistake 2 years ago, he said. This fellow, what's his name? The Chief Constable rustled his papers. Calgary? No, Calgary. Some sort of a professor. Absent-minded bloke, maybe. People like that often vague about times and all that sort of thing. There was perhaps a hint of appeal in his voice, but Huish did not respond. He said, He's a kind of scientist, I understand. Oh, so that you think you've got to accept what he says? Well, said Huish, Sir Reginald seems to have accepted it, and I don't suppose there's anything would get past him. This was a tribute to the Director of Public Prosecutions. No, said Major Finney rather unwillingly. If the DPP's convinced, well, I suppose we've just got to take it. That means opening up the case again. You've brought the relevant data with you, have you, as I asked? Yes, sir. I've got it here. The superintendent spread out various documents on the table. Been over it? The chief constable asked. Yes, sir. I went over it all last night. My memory of it was fairly fresh. After all, it's not so long ago. Well, let's have it, Huish. Where are we? Back at the beginning, sir, said Superintendent Huish. The trouble is, you see, there really wasn't any doubt at the time. No, said the chief constable. It seemed a perfectly clear case. I don't think I'm blaming you, Huish. I was behind you 100%. There wasn't anything else, really, that we could think, said Huish thoughtfully. A call came in that she'd been killed. The information that the boy had been there threatening her, the fingerprint evidence, his fingerprints on the poker, and the money. We picked him up almost at once, and there the money was, in his possession. What sort of impression did he make on you at the time? Huish considered. Bad, he said. Far too cocky and plausible. Came reeling out with his times and his alibis. Cocky, you know the type. Murderers are usually cocky. Think they're so clever. Think whatever they've done is sure to be all right, no matter how things go for other people. He was a wrong 'un, all right. Yes, Finney agreed. He was a wrong 'un. All his record goes to prove that. But were you convinced at once he was a killer? The superintendent considered. It's not a thing you can be sure about. He was the type, I'd say, that very often ends up as a killer. Like Armin in 1938. Long record behind him of pinched bicycles, swindled money, frauds on elderly women, and finally he does one woman in. Pickles her in acid. Gets pleased with himself and starts making a habit of it. I'd have taken Jacko Argyle for one of that type. But it seems, said the chief constable slowly, that we were wrong. Yes, said Huish. Yes, we were wrong. And the chap's dead. It's a bad business. Mind you, he added with sudden animation, he was a wrong 'un, all right. He may not have been a murderer. In fact, he wasn't a murderer, so we find now, but he was a wrong 'un. Well, come on, man, Finney snapped at him. Who did kill her? You've been over the case, you say, last night. Somebody killed her. The woman didn't hit herself on the back of the head with a poker. Somebody else did. Who was it? Superintendent Huish sighed and leaned back in his chair. I'm wondering if we'll ever know, he said. Difficult as all that, eh? Yes, because the scent's cold, and because there'll be very little evidence to find. And I should rather imagine that there never was very much evidence. Well, the point being that it was someone in the house, someone close to her. Don't see who else it could have been, said the superintendent. It was someone there in the house, or it was someone that she herself opened the door to and let in. The Argyles were the lock-it-up type. Burglar bolts on the windows, chains, extra locks on the front door. They'd had one burglary a couple of years before, and it had made them burglar conscious. He paused and went on. The trouble is, sir, that we didn't look elsewhere at the time. The case against Jacko Argyle was complete. Of course, one can see now. The murderer took advantage of that. Took advantage of the fact that the boy had been there, that he'd quarrelled with her, and that he threatened her. Yes. All that person had to do was step in the room, pick up the poker in a gloved hand from where Jacko had thrown it, walk up to the table where Mrs. Argyle was writing, and biff her one on the head. Major Finney said in one simple word, Why? Superintendent Huish nodded slowly. Yes, sir. That's what we've got to find out. It's going to be one of the difficulties. Absence of motive. Well, there didn't seem at the time, said the chief constable, to be any obvious motive knocking about, as you might say. Like most other women who have property and a considerable fortune of their own, she'd entered into such various schemes as are legally permitted to avoid death duties. A beneficiary trust was already in existence. The children were all provided for in advance of her death. They'd get nothing further when she did die. And it wasn't as though she was an unpleasant woman, nagging or bullying or mean. She'd lavished money on them all their lives. Good education, capital sums to start them in jobs, handsome allowances to them all, affection, kindness, benevolence. That's so, sir, agreed Superintendent Huish. On the face of it, there's no reason for anyone to want her out of the way. Of course, he paused. Yes, Huish? Mr. Argyle, I understand, is thinking of remarrying. He's marrying Miss Gwenda Vaughan, who's acted as his secretary over a good number of years. Yes, said Major Finney thoughtfully. I suppose there's a motive there. One that we didn't know about at the time. She's been working for him for some years, you say. Think there was anything between them at the time of the murder? I should rather doubt it, sir, said Superintendent Huish. That sort of thing soon gets talked about in a village. I mean, I don't think there were any goings-on, as you might say. Nothing for Mrs. Argyle to find out about or cut up rough about. No, said the chief constable, but he might have wanted to marry Gwenda Vaughan quite badly. She's an attractive young woman, said Superintendent Huish. Not glamorous, I wouldn't say that, but good-looking, and attractive in a nice kind of way. Probably been devoted to him for years, said Major Finney. These women secretaries always seem to be in love with their boss. Well, we've got a motive of a kind for those two, said Huish. Then there's the lady help, the Swedish woman. She mightn't really have been as fond of Mrs. Argyle as she appeared to be. There might have been slights or imagined slights, things she resented. She didn't benefit financially by the death because Mrs. Argyle had already bought her a very handsome annuity. She seems a nice, sensible kind of woman, and not the sort you can imagine hitting anyone on the head with a poker, but you never know, do you? Look at the Lizzie Borden case. No, said the chief constable, you never know. There's no question of an outsider of any kind. No trace of one, said the superintendent. The drawer where the money was pulled out. A sort of attempt had been made to make the room look as though a burglar had been there, but it was a very amateurish effort, sort of thing that fitted in perfectly with young Jacko having tried to create that particular effect. Well, the odd thing to me, said the chief constable, is the money. Yes, said Huish. That's very difficult to understand. One of the fivers Jack Argyle had on him was definitely one that had been given to Mrs. Argyle at the bank that morning. Mrs. Bottlebury was the name written on the back of it. He said his mother had given the money to him, but both Mr. Argyle and Gwenda Vaughan are quite definite that Mrs. Argyle came into the library at 7:15 and told them about Jacko's demands for money and categorically said she'd refused to give him any. It's possible, of course, the chief constable pointed out, with what we know now, that Argyle and the Vaughan girl might have been lying. Yes, that's a possibility. Or perhaps... The superintendent broke off. Yes, Huish? Finney encouraged him. Say someone, we'll call him or her X for the moment, overheard the quarrel and the threats that Jacko was making. Suppose someone saw an opportunity there, got the money, ran after the boy, said that his mother, after all, wanted him to have it, thus paving the way to one of the prettiest little frame-ups ever. Careful to use the poker that he picked up to threaten her with, without smearing his fingerprints. Damn it all, said the Chief Constable angrily. None of it seems to fit with what I know of the family. Who else was in the house that evening besides Argyle and Gwenda Vaughan, Hester Argyle and this Lindstrom woman? The eldest married daughter, Mary Durrant, and her husband were staying there. Well, he's a cripple, isn't he? That lets him out. What about Mary Durrant? She's a very calm piece of goods, sir. You can't imagine her getting excited or killing anyone. The servants? Demanded the Chief Constable. All dailies, sir, and they'd gone home by 6 o'clock. Let me have a look at the times. The superintendent passed the paper to him. Yes, I see. 7:15, Mrs. Argyle was in the library, talking to her husband about Jacko's threats. Gwenda Vaughan was present during part of the conversation. Gwenda Vaughan went home just after 7. Hester Argyle saw her mother alive at about 2 or 3 minutes to 7. After that, Mrs. Argyle was not seen until 7:30, when her dead body was discovered by Miss Lindstrom. Between 7 and 7:30, there was plenty of opportunity. Hester could have killed her. Gwenda Vaughan could have killed her after she left the library and before she left the house. Miss Lindstrom could have killed her when she discovered the body. Leo Argyle was alone in his library from 7:10 until Miss Lindstrom sounded the alarm. He could have gone to his wife's sitting room and killed her any time during that 20 minutes. Mary Durrant, who was upstairs, could have come down during that half hour and killed her mother. And Mrs. Argyle herself could have let anyone in by the front door, as we thought she let Jack Argyle in. Leo Argyle said, if you remember, that he thought he did hear a ring at the bell, and the sound of the front door opening and closing, but he was very vague about the time. We assumed that was when Jacko returned and killed her. Well, he needn't have rung the bell, said Huish. He had a key of his own. They all had. There's another brother, isn't there? Yes, Michael. Works as a car salesman in Drymouth. You'd better find out, I suppose, said the Chief Constable, what he was doing that evening. After 2 years? Said Superintendent Huish. Not likely anyone will remember, is it? Was he asked at the time? Out testing a customer's car, I understand. No reason for suspecting him then. But he had a key, and he could have come over and killed her. The Chief Constable sighed. I don't know how you're going to set about it, Huish. I don't know whether we're ever going to get anywhere. I'd like to know myself who killed her, said Huish. From all I can make out, she was a fine type of woman. She'd done a lot for people, for unlucky children, for all sorts of charities. She's the sort of person that oughtn't to have been killed. Yes, I'd like to know. Even if we can never get enough evidence to satisfy the DPP, I'd still like to know. Well, I wish you the best of luck, Huish, said the Chief Constable. Fortunately, we've nothing very much on just now, but don't be discouraged if you can't get anywhere. It's a very cold trail. Yes, it's a very cold trail. Chapter 6. The lights went up in the cinema. Advertisements flashed onto the screen. The cinema usherettes walked around with cartons of lemonade and of ice cream. Arthur Calgary scrutinized them. A plump girl with brown hair, a tall dark one, and a small fair-haired one. That was the one he had come to see. Jacko's wife. Jacko's widow, now the wife of a man called Joe Clegg. It was a pretty, rather vapid little face, plastered with makeup, eyebrows plucked, hair hideous and stiff in a cheap perm. Arthur Calgary bought an ice cream carton from her. He had her home address and he meant to call there, but he wanted to see her first while she was still unaware of him. Well, that was that. Not the sort of daughter-in-law he thought that Mrs. Argyle, from all accounts, would have cared about very much. That, no doubt, was why Jacko had kept her dark. He sighed, concealed the ice cream carton carefully under his chair, and leaned back as the lights went out and a new picture began to flash on the screen. Presently he got up and left the cinema. At 11 o'clock the next morning he called at the address he had been given. A 16-year-old boy opened the door, and in answer to Calgary's inquiry said, "Clegg's? Top floor." Calgary climbed the stairs. He knocked at a door and Maureen Clegg opened it. Without her smart uniform and her makeup, she looked a different girl. It was a silly little face, good-natured but with nothing particularly interesting about it. She looked at him doubtfully, frowned suspiciously. My name is Calgary. I believe you have a letter from Mr. Marshall about me." Her face cleared. "Oh, so you're the one. Come in, do." She moved back to let him enter. "Sorry the place is such a mess. I haven't had time to get round to things yet." She swept some untidy clothes off a chair and pushed aside the remains of a breakfast consumed some time ago. "Do sit down. I'm sure it's ever so good of you to come." "I felt it was the least I could do," said Calgary. She gave a little embarrassed laugh, as though not really taking in what he meant. "Mr. Marshall wrote me about it," she said, "about that story that Jackie made up. How it was all true after all, that someone did give him a lift back that night to Drymouth. So it was you, was it?" "Yes," said Calgary. "It was I." "I really can't get over it," said Maureen. "Talked about it half the night, Joe and I did. Really, I said, it might be something on the pictures. 2 years ago, isn't it, or nearly?" "About that, yes." "Just the sort of thing you do see in the pictures. And of course you say to yourself, that sort of thing's all nonsense. It wouldn't happen in real life. And now there it is. It does happen. It's really quite exciting in a way, isn't it?" "I suppose," said Calgary, "that it might be thought of like that." He was watching her with a vague kind of pain. She chattered on quite happily. "There's poor old Jackie dead, not able to know about it. He got pneumonia, you know, in prison. I expect it was the damp or something, don't you?" She had, Calgary realized, a definite romantic image of prison in her mind's eye. Damp underground cells with rats gnawing one's toes. "At the time, I must say," she went on, "him dying seemed all for the best." "Yes, I suppose so. Yes, I suppose it must have done." "Well, I mean, there he was, shut up for years and years and years. Joe said I'd better get a divorce, and I was just setting about it." "You wanted to divorce him?" "Well, it's no good being tied to a man who's going to be in prison for years, is it? Besides, you know, although I was fond of Jackie and all that, he wasn't what you call a steady type. I never did think really that our marriage would last." "Had you actually started proceedings for divorce when he died?" "Well, I had in a kind of a way. I mean, I'd been to a lawyer. Joe got me to go. Of course, Joe never could stand Jackie." "Joe is your husband?" "Yes, he works in the electricity. Got a very good job, and they think a lot of him. He always told me Jackie was no good. But of course, I was just a kid and silly then. Jackie had a great way with him, you know." "So it seems, from all I've heard about him." "He was wonderful at getting round women. I don't know why, really. He wasn't good-looking or anything like that. Monkey face, I used to call him. But all the same, he'd got away with him. You'd find you were doing anything he wanted you to do. Mind you, he came in useful once or twice. Just after we were married, he got into trouble at the garage, where he was working over some work done on a customer's car. I never understood the rights of it. Anyway, the boss was ever so angry, but Jackie outranked the boss's wife. Quite old she was. Must have been near on 50. But Jackie flattered her up, played her off this way and that, till she didn't know whether she was on her head or on her heels. She'd have done anything for him in the end. Got round her husband, she did, and got him to say as he wouldn't prosecute if Jackie paid the money back. But he never knew where the money came from. It was his own wife what provided it. That really gave us a laugh, Jackie and me." Calgary looked at her with faint repulsion. "Was it so very funny?" "Oh, I think so, don't you? Really, it was a scream. An old woman like that crazy about Jackie and raking out her savings for him." Calgary sighed. Things were never, he thought, the way you imagined them to be. Every day he found himself less attracted to the man whose name he had taken so much trouble to vindicate. He was almost coming to understand and share the point of view which had so astounded him at Sunny Point. "I only came here, Mrs. Clegg," he said, "to see if there was anything I could, do for you to make up for what had happened." Maureen Clegg looked faintly puzzled. "Very nice of you, I'm sure," she said. "But why should you? We're all right. Joe's making good money. I've got my own job. I'm an usherette, you know, at the Picturedrome." "Yes, I know. We're going to get a telly next month," the girl went on proudly. "I'm very glad," said Arthur Calgary. "More glad than I can say that this unfortunate business hasn't left any, permanent shadow." He was finding it more and more difficult to choose the right words when talking to this girl who had been married to Jacko. Everything he said sounded pompous, artificial. Why couldn't he talk naturally to her? "I was afraid it might have been a terrible grief to you." She stared at him, her wide blue eyes not understanding in the least what he meant. "It was horrid at the time," she said. "All the neighbours talking and the worry of it all. Though I must say the police were very kind, all things considered. Talked to me very politely and spoke very nice about everything." He wondered if she had had any feeling for the dead man. He asked her a question abruptly. "Did you think he'd done it?" he said. "Do you mean, do I think he'd done his mother in?" "Yes, just that." "Well, of course, well, yes, I suppose I did in a way. Of course, he said he hadn't, but I mean, you could never believe anything Jackie said. And it did seem as though he must have done. You see, he could get very nasty, Jackie could, if you stood up against him. I knew he was in a hole of some kind. He wouldn't say much to me, just swore at me when I asked him about it. But he went off that day and he said that it was going to be all right. His mother, he said, would stump up. She'd have to. So, of course, I believed him." "He had never told his family about your marriage, I understand. You hadn't met them?" "No. You see, they were classy people, had a big house and all that. I wouldn't have gone down very well. Jackie thought it best to keep me dark. Besides, he said if he took me along, his mother would want to run my life as well as his. She couldn't help running people, he said, and he'd had enough of it. We did very well as we were, he said." She appeared to display no resentment, but to think indeed that her husband's behaviour had been perfectly natural. "I suppose it was a great shock to you when he was arrested." "Oh, naturally. However could he do such a thing?" I said to myself. "But then, you can't get away from things. He always had a very nasty temper when anything upset him." Calgary leaned forward. "Let's put it like this. It really seemed to you not at all a surprising thing that your husband should have hit his mother on the head with a poker and stolen a large quantity of money from her." "Well, Mr. Calgary, if you'll excuse me, that's putting it in a rather nasty way. I don't suppose he meant to hit her so hard. Don't suppose he meant to do her in. She just refused to give him the money. He caught up the poker and he threatened her, and when she stuck it out, he lost control of himself and gave her a swipe. I don't suppose he meant to kill her. That was just his bad luck. You see, he needed the money very badly. He'd have gone to prison if he hadn't got it." "So you don't blame him?" "Well, of course I blamed him. I don't like all that nasty, violent behaviour. And your own mother, too. No, I don't think it was a nice thing to do at all. I began to think as Joe was right in telling me I oughtn't to have had anything to do with Jackie. But you know how it is. It's ever so difficult for a girl to make up her mind. Joe, you see, was always the steady kind. I've known him a long time. Jackie was different. He'd got education and all that. He seemed very well off too, always splashing his money about. And of course, he had a way with him, as I've been telling you. He could get round anybody. He got round me, all right. You'll regret it, my girl, that's what Joe said. I thought that was just sour grapes and the green-eyed monster, if you understand what I mean. But Joe turned out to be quite right in the end. Calgary looked at her. He wondered if she still failed to understand the full implications of his story. Right in exactly what way? He asked. Well, landed me up in the proper mess he did. I mean, we've always been respectable. Mother brought us up very careful. We've always had things nice and no talk. And there was the police arresting my husband, and all the neighbours knowing. In all the papers it was, News of the World and all the rest of them. And ever so many reporters coming round and asking questions, it put me in a very nasty position altogether. But my dear child, said Arthur Calgary, you do realize now that he didn't do it. For a moment the fair, pretty face looked bewildered. Oh, of course, I was forgetting. But all the same, well, I mean, he did go there and kick up a fuss and threaten her and all that. If he hadn't done that, he wouldn't have been arrested at all, would he? No, said Calgary. No, that is quite true. Possibly, he thought, this pretty, silly child was more of a realist than he was. Oh, it was awful, went on Maureen. I didn't know what to do, and then Mum said better go over right away and see his people. They'd have to do something for me, she said. After all, she said, you've got your rights, and you'd best show them as you know how to look after them. So off I went. It was that foreign lady help what opened the door to me. At first I couldn't make her understand. Seemed as if she couldn't believe it. It's impossible, she kept saying, it's impossible. It's quite impossible that Jackie should be married to you. Hurt my feelings a bit, that did. Well, married we are, I said, and not in a registry office neither, in a church. It was the way Mum wanted. And she said, it's not true, I don't believe it. And then Mr. Argyle came, and he was ever so kind. Told me not to worry more than I could help, and that everything possible would be done to defend Jackie. Asked me how I was off for money, and sent me a regular allowance every week. He keeps it up too, even now. Joe doesn't like me taking it, but I say to him, don't be silly, they can spare it, can't they? Sent me a very nice cheque for a wedding present as well, he did, when Joe and I got married. And he said he was very glad, and that he hoped this marriage would be happier than the last one. Yes, he's ever so nice, Mr. Argyle is. She turned her head as the door opened. Oh, here's Joe now. Joe was a thin-lipped, fair-haired young man. He received Maureen's explanations and introduction with a slight frown. Hoped we'd done with all that, he said disapprovingly. Excuse me for saying so, sir, but it does no good to go raking up the past. That's what I feel. Maureen was unlucky. That's all there is to say about it. Yes, said Calgary, I quite see your point of view. Of course, said Joe Clegg. She never ought to have taken up with a chap like that. I knew he was no good. There had been stories about him already. He'd been under a probation officer twice. Once they begin like that, they go on. First it's embezzling or swindling women out of their savings, and in the end, it's murder. But this, said Calgary, wasn't murder. So you say, sir, said Joe Clegg. He sounded himself completely unconvinced. Jack Argyle has a perfect alibi for the time the crime was committed. He was in my car, being given a lift to Drymouth. So you see, Mr. Clegg, he could not possibly have committed the crime. Possibly not, sir, said Clegg. But all the same, it's a pity raking it all up, if you'll excuse me. After all, he's dead now, and it can't matter to him. And it starts the neighbours talking again and making them think things. Calgary rose. Well, perhaps from your point of view, that is one way of looking at it. But there is such a thing as justice, you know, Mr. Clegg. I've always understood, said Clegg, that an English trial was as fair a thing as can be. The finest system in the world can make a mistake, said Calgary. "Justice is, after all, in the hands of men, and men are fallible." After he had left them and was walking down the street, he felt more disturbed in his own mind than he could have thought possible. Would it really have been better, he said to himself, if my memory of that day had never come back to me? After all, as that smug, tight-lipped fellow has just said, the boy is dead. He's gone before a judge who makes no mistake. Whether he's remembered as a murderer or merely as a petty thief, it can make no difference to him now. Then a sudden wave of anger rose in him. But it ought to make a difference to someone, he thought. Someone ought to be glad. Why aren't they? This girl, well, I can understand it well enough. She may have had an infatuation for Jacko, but she never loved him. Probably isn't capable of loving anybody. But the others, his father, his sister, his nurse, they should have been glad. They should have spared a thought for him before they began to fear for themselves. Yes, someone should have cared. Miss Argyle? At the second desk there. Calgary stood for a moment watching her. Neat, small, very quiet and efficient. She was wearing a dark blue dress with white collar and cuffs. Her blue-black hair was coiled neatly in her neck. Her skin was dark, darker than an English skin could ever be. Her bones, too, were small. This was the child of mixed race that Mrs. Argyle had taken as a daughter into the family. The eyes that looked up and met his were dark, quite opaque. They were eyes that told you nothing. Her voice was low and sympathetic. "Can I help you?" "You are Miss Argyle, Miss Christina Argyle?" "Yes." "My name is Calgary, Arthur Calgary. You may have heard—" "Yes, I have heard about you. My father wrote to me. I would very much like to talk to you." She glanced up at the clock. "The library closes in half an hour, if you could wait until then." "Certainly. Perhaps you would come and have a cup of tea with me somewhere." "Thank you." She turned away from him to a man who had come up behind him. "Yes, can I help you?" Arthur Calgary moved away. He wandered round, examining the contents of the shelves, observant all the time of Tina Argyle. She remained the same, calm, competent, unperturbed. The half-hour passed slowly for him, but at last a bell rang, and she nodded to him. "I will meet you outside in a few minutes' time." She did not keep him waiting. She wore no hat, merely a thick dark coat. He asked her where they should go. "I do not know Redmyn very well," he explained. "There is a tea place near the cathedral. It's not good, but for that reason it is less full than the others." Presently they were established at a small table, and a desiccated, bored waitress had taken their order with a complete lack of enthusiasm. "It will not be a good tea," said Tina apologetically, "but I thought that perhaps you would like to be reasonably private." "That is so. I must explain my reasons for seeking you out. You see, I have met the other members of your family, including, I may say, your brother Jacko's wife, widow. You were the only member of the family I had not met. Oh, yes, and there is your married sister, of course." "You feel it necessary to meet us all?" It was said quite politely, but there was a certain detachment about her voice which made Calgary a little uncomfortable. "Hardly as a social necessity," he agreed dryly. "And it is not mere curiosity. But wasn't it? It is just that I wanted to express personally to all of you my very deep regret that I failed to establish your brother's innocence at the time of the trial." "I see." "If you were fond of him, were you fond of him?" She considered for a moment, then she said, "No. I was not fond of Jacko. Yet I hear from all sides that he had great charm." She said clearly, but without passion, "I distrusted and disliked him. You never had, forgive me, any doubts that he had killed your mother?" It never occurred to me that there could be any other solution. The waitress brought their tea. The bread and butter was stale, the jam a curiously jellified substance, the cakes garish and unappetizing. The tea was weak. He sipped his and then said, "It seems I've been made to understand that this information I've brought, which clears your brother of the charge of murder, may have repercussions that will not be so agreeable. It may bring fresh anxieties to you all." "Because the case will have to be reopened?" "Yes. You have already thought about that?" "My father seems to think it is inevitable." "I am sorry. I really am sorry." "Why are you sorry, Dr. Calgary?" "I hate to be the cause of bringing fresh trouble upon you." "But would you have been satisfied to remain silent?" "You're thinking in terms of justice?" "Yes. Weren't you?" "Of course. Justice seemed to me to be very important. Now I'm beginning to wonder whether there are other things that are more important." "Such as?" His thoughts flew to Hester. "Such as innocence, perhaps." The opaqueness of her eyes increased. "What do you feel, Miss Argyle?" She was silent for a moment or two. Then she said, "I'm thinking of those words in Magna Carta. 'To no man will we refuse justice.'" "I see," he said. "That is your answer." Chapter 7. Dr. McMaster was an old man with bushy eyebrows, shrewd grey eyes, and a pugnacious chin. He leaned back in his shabby armchair and studied his visitor carefully. He found that he liked what he saw. On Calgary's side, also, there was a feeling of liking. For the first time almost since he had come back to England, he felt that he was talking to someone who appreciated his own feelings and point of view. "It's very good of you to see me, Dr. McMaster," he said. "Not at all," said the doctor. "I'm bored to death since I retired from practice. Young men of my own profession tell me I must sit here like a dummy, taking care of my groggy heart. But don't think it comes natural to me, it doesn't. I listen to the wireless blah blah blah, and occasionally my housekeeper persuades me to look at television, flick, flick, flick. I've been a busy man, run off my feet all my life. I don't take kindly to sitting still. Reading tires my eyes, so don't apologize for taking up my time." "The first thing I've got to make you understand," said Calgary, "is why I'm still concerning myself over all this. Logically speaking, I suppose, I've done what I came to do. Told the unpalatable fact of my concussion and loss of memory, vindicated the boy's character. After that, the only sane and logical thing to do would be to go away and try to forget about it, eh? Isn't that right?" "Depends," said Dr. McMaster. "Something worrying you?" he asked in the ensuing pause. "Yes," said Calgary. "Everything worries me. You see, my news was not received as I thought it would be." "Oh, well," said Dr. McMaster, "nothing odd in that. Happens every day. We rehearse a thing beforehand in our own minds. Doesn't matter what it is. Consultation with another practitioner, proposal of marriage to a young lady, talk with your boy before going back to school. When the thing comes off, it never goes as you thought it would. You've thought it out, you see, all the things that you are going to say, and you've usually made up your mind what the answers are going to be. And of course that's what throws you off every time. The answers are never what you think they will be. That's what's upset you, I suppose." "Yes," said Calgary. "What did you expect? Expected them to be all over you?" "I expected—" He considered a moment. "Blame? Perhaps. Resentment? Very likely. But also thankfulness." McMaster grunted. "And there's no thankfulness, and not as much resentment as you think there ought to be." "Something like that," Calgary confessed. Well, that's because you didn't know the circumstances until you got there. Why have you come to me exactly? Calgary said slowly, Because I want to understand more about the family. I only know the acknowledged facts. A very fine and unselfish woman doing her best for her adopted children. A public-spirited woman, a fine character. Set against that, what's called, I believe, a problem child. A child that goes wrong, the young delinquent. Well, that's all I know. I don't know anything else. I don't know anything about Mrs. Argyle herself. You're quite right, said McMaster. You're putting your finger on the thing that matters. If you think it over, you know, that's always the interesting part of any murder. What the person was like who was murdered. Everybody's always so busy inquiring into the mind of the murderer. You've been thinking probably that Mrs. Argyle was the sort of woman who shouldn't have been murdered. Well, I should imagine that everyone felt that. Ethically, said McMaster, you're quite right. But you know, he rubbed his nose, isn't it the Chinese who held that beneficence is to be accounted a sin rather than a virtue? They've got something there, you know. Beneficence does things to people, ties them up in knots. We all know what human nature's like. Do a chap a good turn and you feel kindly towards him, you like him. But the chap who's had the good turn done to him, does he feel so kindly to you? Does he really like you? He ought to, of course. But does he? Well, said the doctor, after a moment's pause, there you are. Mrs. Argyle was what you might call a wonderful mother. But she overdid the beneficence. No doubt of that. Or wanted to. Or definitely tried to do so. They weren't her own children, Calgary pointed out. No, said McMaster. That's just where the trouble came in, I imagine. You've only got to look at any normal mother cat. She has her kittens. She's passionately protective of them. She'll scratch anyone who goes near them, and then in a week or so, she starts resuming her own life. She goes out, hunts a bit, takes a rest from her young. She'll still protect them if anyone attacks them, but she's no longer obsessed by them all the time. She'll play with them a bit. Then, when they're a bit too rough, she'll turn on them and give them a spank and tell them she wants to be let alone for a bit. She's reverting, you see, to nature. And as they go up, she cares less and less about them, and her thoughts go more and more to the attractive toms in the neighbourhood. That's what you might call the normal pattern of female life. I've seen many girls and women with strong maternal instincts, keen on getting married, but mainly, though they mayn't quite know it themselves, because of their urge to motherhood. And the babies come, they're happy and satisfied. Life goes back into proportion for them. They can take an interest in their husbands and in the local affairs and in the gossip that's going round and, of course, in their children, but it's all in proportion. The maternal instinct, in a purely physical sense, is satisfied, you see. Well, with Mrs. Argyle, the maternal instinct was very strong, but the physical satisfaction of bearing a child or children never came, and so her maternal obsession never really slackened. She wanted children, lots of children. She couldn't have enough of them. Her whole mind, night and day, was on those children. Her husband didn't count any more. He was just a pleasant abstraction in the background. No, everything was the children. Their feeding, their clothing, their playing, everything to do with them. Far too much was done for them. The thing she didn't give them, and that they needed, was a little plain, honest-to-goodness neglect. They weren't just turned out into the garden to play like ordinary children in the country. No, they had to have every kind of gadget, artificial climbing things and stepping stones, a house built in the trees, sand brought, and a little beach made on the river. Their food wasn't plain, ordinary food. Why, those kids even had their vegetables sieved up to nearly 5 years old, and their milk sterilized, and the water tested, and their calories weighed, and their vitamins computed. Mind you, I'm not being unprofessional in talking to you like this. Mrs. Argyle was never my patient. If she needed a doctor, she went to one in Harley Street. Not that she often went. She was a very robust and healthy woman. But I was the local doctor who was called in to see the children. Though she was inclined to think I was a bit casual over them, I told her to let them eat a few blackberries from the hedges. I told her it wouldn't hurt them to get their feet wet and have an occasional cold in the head, and that there's nothing much wrong with a child who's got a temperature of 99. No need to fuss till it's over 101. Those children were pampered and spoon-fed and fussed over and loved in many ways it didn't do them any good. "You mean," said Calgary, "it didn't do Jacko any good?" "Well, I wasn't really thinking only of Jacko. Jacko, to my mind, was a liability from the start. The modern label for him is a crazy, mixed-up kid. It's just as good as any other label. The Argyles did their best for him. They did everything that could have been done. I've seen a good many Jackos in my lifetime. Later in life, when the boy has gone hopelessly wrong, the parents say, 'If only I'd been stricter with him when he was young,' or else they say, 'I was too harsh, if only I'd been kinder.' I don't think myself it amounts to a penn'orth of difference. There are those who go wrong because they've had an unhappy home and essentially feel unloved. And again, there are those who go wrong because, at the least stress, they're going to go wrong anyway. I put Jacko down as one of the latter." "So you weren't surprised," said Calgary, "when he was arrested for murder?" "Frankly, yes, I was surprised. Not because the idea of murder would have been particularly repugnant to Jacko. He was the sort of young man who is conscienceless. But the kind of murder he'd done did surprise me. Oh, I know he had a violent temper and all that. As a child he often hurled himself on another child or hit him with some heavy toy or bit of wood, but it was usually a child smaller than himself. And it was usually not so much blind rage as the wish to hurt or get hold of something that he himself wanted. The kind of murder I'd have expected Jacko to do if he did one was the type where a couple of boys go out on a raid. Then, when the police come after them, the Jackos say, 'Biff him on the head, bud. Let him have it. Shoot him down.' They're willing for murder, ready to incite murder, but they've not got the nerve to do murder themselves with their own hands. That's what I should have said. Now, it seems," added the doctor, "I would have been right." Calgary stared down at the carpet, a worn carpet, with hardly any of its pattern remaining. "I didn't know," he said, "what I was up against. I didn't realize what it was going to mean to the others. I didn't see that it must—" The doctor was nodding gently. "Yes," he said, "it looks that way, doesn't it? It looks as though you've got to put it right there amongst them." "I think," said Calgary, "that that's really what I came to talk to you about. There doesn't seem, on the face of it, any real motive for any of them to have killed her." "Not on the face of it, but if you go a little behind the face of it. Oh yes, I think there's plenty of reason why someone might have wanted to kill her." "Why?" asked Calgary. "You feel it's really your business, do you?" "I think so. I can't help feeling so." "Perhaps I should feel the same in your place. I don't know. Well, what I'd say is that none of them really belonged to themselves. Not so long as their mother, I'll call her that for convenience, was alive. She had a good hold of them still, you know, all of them." "In what way?" "Well, financially, she'd provided for them handsomely. There was a large income. It was divided between them in such proportions as the trustees thought fit, but although Mrs. Argyle herself was not one of the trustees, nevertheless her wishes, so long as she was alive, were operative." He paused, and then went on. "It is interesting in a way how they all tried to escape, how they fought not to conform to the pattern that she'd arranged for them. Because she did arrange a pattern, and a very good pattern. She wanted to give them a good home, a good education, a good allowance, and a good start in the professions that she chose for them. She wanted to treat them exactly as though they were hers and Leo Argyle's own children. Only, of course, they weren't hers and Leo Argyle's own children. They had entirely different instincts, feelings, aptitudes, and demands. Young Mickey now works as a car salesman. Hester more or less ran away from home to go on the stage. She fell in love with a very undesirable type and was absolutely no good as an actress. She had to come home. She had to admit, and she didn't like admitting, that her mother had been right. Mary Durrant insisted on marrying a man during the war whom her mother warned her not to marry. He was a brave and intelligent young man, but an absolute fool when it came to business matters. Then he got polio. He was brought as a convalescent to Sunny Point. Mrs. Argyle was putting pressure on them to live there permanently. The husband was quite willing. Mary Durrant was holding out desperately against it. She wanted her home and her husband to herself. But she'd have given in, no doubt, if her mother hadn't died. Mickey, the other boy, has always been a young man with a chip on his shoulder. He resented bitterly being abandoned by his own mother. He resented it as a child, and he never got over it. I think at heart he always hated his adopted mother. Then there's the Swedish masseuse woman. She didn't like Mrs. Argyle. She was fond of the children, and she's fond of Leo. She accepted many benefits from Mrs. Argyle and probably tried to be grateful but couldn't manage it. Still, I hardly think that her feelings of dislike could cause her to hit her benefactor on the head with a poker. After all, she could leave at any moment she liked. As for Leo Argyle— Yes, what about him? Well, he's going to marry again, said Dr. McMaster, and good luck to him. A very nice young woman. Warm-hearted, kind, good company, and very much in love with him. Has been for a long time. What did she feel about Mrs. Argyle? You can probably guess just as well as I can. Naturally, Mrs. Argyle's death simplified things a good deal. Leo Argyle's not the type of a man to have an affair with his secretary with his wife in the same house. I don't really think he'd have left his wife either. Calgary said slowly, I saw them both. I talked to them. I can't really believe that either of them— I know, said McMaster. One can't believe, can one? And yet, one of that household did it, you know. You really think so? I don't see what else there is to think. The police are fairly sure that it wasn't the work of an outsider, and the police are probably right. But which of them? Said Calgary. McMaster shrugged his shoulders. One simply doesn't know. You've no idea yourself from your knowledge of them all. Shouldn't tell you if I had, said McMaster. After all, what have I got to go on? Unless there's some factor that I've missed, none of them seems a likely murderer to me. And yet, I can't rule any one of them out as a possibility. No, he added slowly, my view is that we shall never know. The police will make inquiries and all that sort of thing. They'll do their best, but to get evidence after this time, with so little to go upon— He shook his head. No, I don't think that the truth will ever be known. There are cases like that, you know. One reads about them 50, 100 years ago. Cases where one of 3 or 4 or 5 people must have done it, but there wasn't enough evidence, and no one's ever been able to say. Do you think it's going to be like that here? Well, said Dr. McMaster, yes, I do. Again he cast a shrewd look at Calgary. And that's what's so terrible, isn't it? He said. Terrible, said Calgary, because of the innocent. That's what she said to me. Who? Who said what to you? The girl, Hester. She said I didn't understand that it was the innocent who mattered. It's what you've just been saying to me, that we shall never know who is innocent, the doctor finished for him. Yes, if we could only know the truth. Even if it doesn't come to an arrest or trial or conviction, just to know. Because otherwise— He paused. Yes, said Calgary. Work it out for yourself, said Dr. McMaster. No, I don't need to say that. You already have. He went on. It reminds me, you know, of the Bravo case. Nearly 100 years ago now, I suppose, but books are still being written about it, making out a perfectly good case for his wife having done it, or Mrs. Cox having done it, or Dr. Gully, or even for Charles Bravo having taken the poison, in spite of the coroner's verdict. All quite plausible theories, but no one now can ever know the truth. And so Florence Bravo, abandoned by her family, died alone of drink, and Mrs. Cox, ostracized and with 3 little boys, lived to be an old woman, with most of the people she knew believing her to be a murderess, and Dr. Gully was ruined professionally and socially. Someone was guilty and got away with it, but the others were innocent and didn't get away with anything. "That mustn't happen here," said Calgary. "It mustn't."